What is up, Waffle Gang? I do hope you are well. My name is Mark, and today we're checking out some Neighbours from Hell. I couldn't find a whole bunch of stories from this one specific subreddit, so I've looked all over Reddit, and I'm going to put it under the title Neighbours from Hell. You guys know I love a Neighbours from Hell story. I find them extra spicy and I just love it. So thank you for your time, support and love. And if you do love a different subreddit, don't forget to hit that like button because that lets me know that you are liking the content. Without it, I cannot judge. With that being said, let's crack on with today's stories. Much love, guys. Now, our first story comes from Disgruntled Veteran. My pool is not a motel room. Background, I am a combat veteran and a school teacher at this time, and my wife was a school teacher as well. So I bought my first house 12 years ago. It was in a low middle class neighborhood with a lot of working class families. My house had a pool in the backyard and my parents bought me and my wife a hot tub as a wedding/housewarming gift. 2 weeks after moving in, we found a stranger and 6 teenage kids swimming in our pool when we got home. We would call them Entitled Mum EM, Entitled Daughter ED, Entitled Son ES, and the others I assumed to be their friends and/or boyfriend. ED was about 18 or 19 years old, and her brother about 17. When we told them to get out and get off our property, the EM told me that the previous owner gave them permission to come over whenever they wanted to swim. I explained to her that I was the new owner and that I was not okay with it. I told EM that not only do I not know them, but there is a legal liability for me if they got hurt. She yelled and fake cried, saying I was being a bad neighbour, selfish, and forcing her kids to sweat in the summer heat. She told me that if they died of heat stroke, it was my fault for not letting them swim in my pool. I told her to get the fuck off my property and never return. Fast forward 2 weeks, I had to put a no trespassing sign on my property in multiple spots and had gotten to know many of the not entitled neighbours. They were great and told me to ignore EM and her kids. They told us she was already bad mouthing us, but no one ever believed her. Now I start to notice when I wake up in the morning that there is evidence of people using my pool and hot tub at night when we are asleep or away. I find beer cans, cigarette butts and even a used condom. I figure it has to be EM and her brats, so I install cameras on the grounds and start videotaping. Sure enough, I catch ED and a few others hanging around in my pool Friday nights when my wife and I are out. Friday night she goes to a friend's house for movies and wine and I play Warhammer 40k or card games. I figure they must have been waiting for us to leave and then throw a mini party or were quietly swimming while we slept. So I discussed it with my wife and decided to teach EM and her brats a lesson. So the next Friday night, I park my car a street over and my wife does the same. We wait in the dark house to see if any of them come over. ED and I assume her boyfriend, ES and I assume his girlfriend, and 4 other teen couples come right over and start skinny dipping in my pool and hot tub. Why a bro and sis would do that together still bothers me. They have beer and I can smell the weed from inside the house. I wait 45 minutes for them to get really into their fun and 2 of them are actually having sex in my pool. I then spring my trap. I go out with my rifle, Ruger Mini 14, with a 20 round magazine for you gun enthusiasts like me, pointed at the ground but at the ready. When I reach the pool, my wife flips on the backlights and I yell for them to freeze or I'll shoot. My wife calls the police meanwhile. They all have the deer in the headlights look on their faces and not one of them tries to speak for a good minute. The ED starts to tell us that she has permission to be there and that we need to let them get dressed. I tell them that if they move towards me or their property, that I would consider them to be charging me or reaching for a weapon and I'd shoot. When they're butt naked. They must have believed me because they froze. One girl begged me to give her clothes while she was trying to cover her breast with her hands. Not being a total jerk, I say that I will throw them all their clothing. I then walk over to their piles of clothes, phones and purses and throw everything into the pool. They freak out trying to save their phones and other goods. After 10 minutes, the police show up and they have the kids climb out of their pool wearing their soaked clothes and trying to shake their phones dry. I show the police the videos from our cameras, the no trespassing signs, and explain to them that I've told them and their mother they were persona non grata. The kids were arrested for trespass and possession of a controlled substance, underage drinking, and indecent exposure. The police recommended that next time I leave the gun in the safe and let them just come and get them. I told them that I thought they may attack my wife and had to stand my ground. I proved that I never pointed at them with the videos, so I couldn't be charged with anything. As the kids are being loaded into the police cruisers, EM shows up yelling at the police and my wife and I. She demands that the police let them go and even tries to open the door on one of the cruisers. The police threaten her with being arrested if she doesn't back off and leave my wife and I alone. I later found out that the charges against the teens were reduced and they all agreed to plea deals. They all got community service, fines, and were put on probation. We got a restraining order against EM and her brats so they couldn't bother us again. I sent a bill to the EM for the cost of draining, disinfecting and refilling my pool and having a professional cleaning service clean up the kids' mess. The bill was for about $400. I had my parents' attorney send it to EM with a letter stating that if it was not paid in 30 days, then we would sue her for a larger amount. She paid, sent a check to my attorney, and thankfully it did not bounce. About a year later, the entire entitled family moved away and we never heard from them again. Now, this is definitely Neighbours from Hell, but this could have went on pro-revenge as well. This is what I never understand about people. Is why would you think that you could just go in someone's garden and use their pool and think you're going to get away with it constantly and it's the right thing to do? How can you have the cheek to do that? I never understand it. But wow, what a way to start off this. As I said, I love Neighbours from Hell. And let's move on to the next one. And our next story is from Fred's Red. Neighbour steals my mail, I get revenge. For the past few months, I've suspected that my upstairs neighbour has been stealing some of my mail. I buy a lot of things online like books and craft supplies, and every now and then there's been a small things that were meant to arrive on a certain day that never did. One day I caught her wandering around my front door, and when I asked her what she was doing, she said, "Oh, I was looking for something I think I dropped into your yard." I got surveillance cameras installed a while ago, which were not noticeable to my neighbours. The cameras that's pointed at my front door isn't visible from the driveway. You can only see it if you're in my backyard. Here comes the trap. I purchased a few postage boxes and made up a few booby traps for her. The first one was a glitter bomb. I set up the box to make sure she would get the glitter in the face as soon as she opened it. I packed it to make it look like a postage parcel, then sat it on my front door. 20 minutes later, I saw her walking into my front door. She looked around and then picked up the box and walked away. My only regret is that I didn't get to see her reaction when she got a face full of glitter. I haven't noticed any other mail go missing after that, but she will regret it if she does it again. The second trap will be much worse. Sinister. And isn't like stealing mail like a really illegal offense? Can't you get badly done for that? If you got the evidence for it, I'd take it straight to the police. But what is your thoughts on that one? I've seen a couple of these glitter bombs on YouTube before and they do look hilarious. I don't think I would like glitter to the face there. But I won't be stealing mail either. And then we got a bunch of small ones which I found on Ask Reddit about people having crazy neighbours. So we'll start off with the Brontosaurus saying, "Crazy old Dolores, lived kitty corner to my parents' backyard growing up. My sister and I always tiptoed sprinted past the house to be as quick and quiet as possible. One spring day, our other neighbour lost their puppy. The whole family was out looking for it. Well, the dad was checking under the cars and gets the Dolores prehistoric Chevy that was held together with duct tape and a prayer. I don't think the thing even ran. Well, Dolores kicks open the front door and pumps the 12-gauge shotgun she's got strapped across her chest. The guy backs away, hands up quickly as he could, trying to explain about the puppy. Dolores would tell anybody who listened how she caught a Mexican trying to steal her car. It should be noted that we lived in a particularly safe neighbourhood in a relatively safe, quiet city, so the fact that her first instinct was to grab a shotgun was a particular overreaction. One day my dad hired a plumber. The plumber coincidentally grew up in the neighbourhood and unfortunately had his bike stolen as a kid. He told us he had been hired by Dolores' children to fix something in her crawl space. While he's inching along in the dark, he sees a collection of nearly a dozen children's bicycles, including his own. She just stole and collected kids' bikes as a sadistic hobby. What the fuck? It sounds like a horror movie, that last bit there. Kids' bikes all piled up in some dark basement. Oh, man. And Shaolin says that the little girl next door to our rental house lived with her father and grandparents, and I guess she didn't want to tell them that she got her period, so she started throwing her used sanitary pads over the fence into our yard, where my dog would chew them up and come running into the house with his new toys. We couldn't figure out where they were coming from until I set up a sting operation, basically peering angrily out my kitchen window from behind the curtains like a crazy old bat for 2 hours straight. Caught her, red-handed and told her granny, who was suitably horrified. I assumed they had the talk because it stopped that day. And a deleted user says, my previous next door neighbor was awful. I actually posted about her and asked for advice after she made a CPS threat last year. The question was picked up by a couple of online news sources, so we aren't the only people who think she is crazy. She called CPS on us last year because my older two sons, 7 and 5 at the time, were playing football in the front yard during a sun shower. She basically told CPS that we locked all of our kids, including our toddler, outside during a thunderstorm and wouldn't let them back inside. She said they were begging to come in and we wouldn't let them in. It was a complete lie. They were having fun, the door wasn't locked, and my wife could see them from the living room window. We got a CPS visit and the case was closed. A few days later, my wife was outside playing with our toddler. The neighbour approached my wife and asked her if she learned her lesson. We tried not to make any contact with her after that, but she has made complaints about our treehouse and complaints about the kids playing too loudly outside. She also called CPS on our friends across the street because their son had a black eye. He got the black eye in wrestling, but the neighbour called anyway. She frequently yelled at kids for not wearing jackets at the bus stop and still went to the bus stop with her 12-year-old. I let my kids ride their bikes to school with their friends and she expressed a concern about that as well. We had a neighbour party once she finally moved. Gee whiz. And another deleted user says, he shared a wall with me and my now ex. We couldn't make a peep until after 9 PM without him angrily beating on the wall or our door. His reason for sleeping so early, he had to get up early to go skiing. This man didn't have a job, he just skied every day. It made it hard to feel bad about his sleep. One night, probably around 10 PM, my ex and I were watching Bob Ross, and Bob must have tapped this paintbrush too hard because it sent my neighbour into a frenzy. And at this point we learned to watch things very quietly. He banged on my door, and when I opened it, he was in his boxers with his dick flopping out. He told me he called the cops because he's had it with our noise, and I told him that I'd make sure I'd tell the cop that his dick was out when he came to my door. Shut him the fuck up real fast. Cops come to my door and I open it only to see it's the cop my sister had been screwing. He realises that's me, laughs and closes the door. Neighbour moved when the snow melted. And Facets and Rainbow says, I once had an upstairs neighbour, we'll just call him upstairs, for about 3 months before he got evicted for reasons that will become clear. When upstairs moved in, he came and knocked on my door to introduce himself and to let him know if I was ever bothered by noise. Excellent. He had the strangest haircut I've ever seen, shaved with a ponytail in the back, but with disembodied pointy sideburns, and some of it was dyed blue. But hey, we all have our quirks. Soon I realised that upstairs traps you in conversation every time you see him. He would also stop like 2 minutes into every conversation, shake my hand and introduce himself again. But hey, some people are weird and that's fine. I totally sympathise with awkwardness. Eventually upstairs seemed to convince himself that we had met before in another town. We hadn't, and that it was fate that we met again. It wasn't. And possibly that we were soulmates. We weren't. Have I mentioned the noise? He was constantly on every stimulant ever and just kind of never slept. And thanks to his love of playing music full volume at 3 in the morning, none of us ever slept either. He also screamed, full on screamed, the lyrics to each song. I later heard from the other neighbours that he had been propping the doors open at night so his drug dealer could come in, and that the other neighbour had seen him in the parking lot one night, naked from the waist down, setting an abandoned van on fire. He also had a very loud speakerphone, must have had it hooked up to his sound system, and I got to hear half the conversation of his friends saying things like, well of course he called the cops on you, you chased him with an axe. I started getting cryptic notes and a postcard under my door, and then more notes asking to return the previous notes. Guess he was just lending them to me? Anyway, one night at 1:30, in the goddamn morning, he knocked on my door, then went around and knocked on my window when I didn't answer, then came back around to the door again. I opened the door with a chain on, and we had a conversation that started with, upstairs, it's 1:30, I'm going to bed. You weren't in bed, you were sitting on the couch, and ended with him angrily asking if I just wanted him to fuck off forever, and me saying yes, please do that. The noise got worse. This all accumulated in the night where me and a couple of our neighbours confronted him over the noise. I had no idea how soundproof my ceiling actually was until I went up there. It was like a concert level volume. I didn't know a human could make that much noise. He was very not sober when he eventually answered the door, and the conversation went nowhere. After we all went back to our rooms, he started throwing things on the floor, my ceiling, and yelling, "How'd you like that, bitch?" Upstairs left the apartment that night, accompanied by the police, at 4 in the morning. After 3 separate 911 noise complaints from different neighbours, I felt kind of bad using 911 for that at the time, but looking back, my only regret is that they didn't arrive while he was blasting, "I fought the law and the law won," but screaming, "And I won!" along with it. He got evicted shortly after this. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but that one got me. TLDR. Dude had basically replaced his blood with cocaine and his voice cords with a jet engine, got evicted for noise, arson, drug use, and borderline stalking his female neighbours. And the next one is from Peel Boy. We had a neighbour whose friend's dog bit my wife on the hand, causing permanent nerve damage. Well, none of them were there when it happened, but they got together and concocted a different story of what happened so they could protect their friend and her shitty dog. Since it became a she said, they protected themselves, so they started to let our dog out of the yard and claiming we were harassing them. We are not doing any of these things. They spread rumours about us and our kids and even sent us letters telling us how awful we are. Then one of them sent a letter to my wife's boss about how terrible she is. We had lived there 10 years and it got to the point where we just sold our house and moved. These ladies are all in their 50s and have nothing to do all day but imagine injustice towards them. One of them, we later found out, was let go from her job a few months previous to any of this happening due to similar actions in her workplace. And Pacman1988 says, when my parents moved into their first house back in 1989-1990, they had a neighbour named Nancy. They referred to her as Nancy the Nut because she was really out there. One time my mum was walking me in the stroller and Nancy's mother came up and started asking about me. My mum then asked her how many children she had. Days later, my parents got a misspelled and expletive-filled letter basically saying how dare they ask how many children a woman has. It was Nancy that wrote it. She also put traffic cones in front of her house for no real reason. My dad accidentally backed up over one and dragged it half a block under his car and killed the tree in her front yard by duct taping it. My parents moved in 1993, but my dad saw her one last time a few years later when he was in downtown Chicago. He looked and there she was, several feet away from him, hocking a loogie. She's since passed away, but wow, she was weird. And another deleted user says, the way my neighbour's houses are set up, the Neighbours from Hell's yard is surrounded on two sides by a cement building. He also happened to always have his sound system going in his shed, right next to my house. The result is sound constantly being aimed back into my yard and house. He leaves it on to the point where he will go to bed with it still going. We also suspect he's intoxicated most of the times we try to speak to him. Anyway, fast forward about 3 months, every single day there's his music going, plus his amplified voice and whoever else is over. I've called in a noise complaint and they come at 11 PM with his music still going, and he's been using a sander for the past 3 hours. Cop asks him to turn his music down, then leaves. The next morning our wind chimes were cut. Since then he's been watching my mum when she works on the garden. Last week, he was banging a shovel off a metal pipe for 45 minutes until my mum went inside. There's a lot more than this, but it's kind of scaring us at this point, to be honest. Ooh dear. And Self-Destructive says, lady downstairs moves in and immediately starts making noise complaints to the super about my dad and I. My dad works during the day and sleeps in the city at his girlfriend's house, and I go to school in the city every day and sleep at my long-term boyfriend's house 15 minutes away. My dad and I are both home once a week to gather up things we need to sleep away. We're at the apartment so little, we moved in 3 years ago and all the furniture looks untouched. The closets are actually still filled with boxes. Anyway, when the super goes to Italy and lady downstairs can't get a hold of him, she takes her complaints to the police at 7 AM. The one night/day of the week I sleep at my house because I have a late class. I was awoken by the doorbell and cops at my door, asking me if my dad was home, if I had been making noise. Don't worry, maybe it's just something like the floors being too thin when you were walking around. No dude, I was literally asleep. Whatever, leave lady downstairs a note before heading to class, along the lines of, hi, my name is Self-Destructive, I'm a student and I'm rarely home. If you'd like to meet and talk like adults about your complaints, I get home on whichever day of the week I normally stop by, at 8 PM. Because yeah, keep in mind, I've still never met the lady. Around 6ish, midway through class, I get about 6 calls from 2 alternating numbers. I snuck out of class to listen to the voicemails because I'm one of those people who feels an interior sense of dread when random numbers calls and leaves voicemails. I assume the worst. Apparently, my worst was not creative enough. Lady downstairs called Child Protective Services on me, an 11-year-old with violent behavioural tendencies whose dad leaves her home alone without food or water or a babysitter. She bangs her head on the floor and throws temper tantrums all day and night. When I called the cops, they told me a dishevelled 11-year-old home alone answered the door, so not to mention, she's dirty too. Number 1, I'm 26 years old. 2, I'm in graduate school. 3, I personally am a little offended by the dishevelled comment. I mean, I wasn't looking great, but on the flip side, I had just been woken up to a trifecta of too early, loud buzzer doorbell, and 2 police. Sorry, no ending here. Still currently living through this hellscape, waiting for the day if and when she escalates it even further. And we'll have one more from MAA anytime. This happened a few months ago. There's a girl who lives next door to me. She's probably about 19 years old. I don't talk to her or her family. They are not very neighbourly. Anyways, one night at around 1:30 AM, I'm gaming in my basement with my headphones on and the window open for a nice draft. All of a sudden, I begin to hear something in the background. I take my headphones off and all I can hear is a girl screaming bloody murder and making weird ass gurgling noises. I rushed upstairs to see if my parents were okay to find out what the fuck is going on at 1:30 in the morning. Turns out the girl was having some sort of drug-fueled episode. My dad saw everything. From what he told me, the girl had a fight with her mum and lost her shit. She ran outside the house and started screaming while rolling on the lawn. The best part is that they're shit neighbours and don't pick up their dog turds. She rolled in poop and her mum had to run out after her and forcefully bring her crap-covered daughter back into the house. Bonus, my mum told me that at first she thought it was me watching porn full blast in the basement. Like, what the fuck, mum? Now, what do you guys think of these bunch of nightmare neighbour stories? As I said, I've been wanting to do some nightmare neighbours for a long time, and I love just going around and finding random stories I can find. And I came across this thread and it's just full of little ones that I absolutely enjoyed. There's something about me that I love. I think it's where I used to live in central Oxford. There was always something going on pretty much every other day. You know, the police was round or something was going on. Someone was throwing a hoover from the top of their stairs. Oh yeah, that reminds me. I have my own story about that. That I cover in the next Nightmare Neighbours one we cover, if you're interested, of course. So please let me know if you do want to hear more Nightmare Neighbour stories, and if you have more of your own, let me know in the comments below. Anyway, thanks again guys for being here. If you do have your own Nightmare Neighbour stories, don't forget to post them down below in the comments, and maybe we can make another video out of them and cover those. If it works out, of course, it might not. So don't let me get your hopes up too much, just in case it doesn't work out. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be here. Much love to you, and I will see you in the next one. Take care now. Goodbye.